Welcome to the Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Nicastro. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the untold truths of service leadership. Today's guest, Gyner Ozgul, was last on the podcast when he was the president and COO of Smart Care Equipment. Gyner has served in numerous other leadership and board roles, and in April of this year, he took his current role as the CEO of Fortis Fire and Safety. You may also know Gyner from his role as co-host of the Field Service Excellence podcast and his active presence on LinkedIn and across the industry. Gyner, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back and always fun to talk to you, Sarah.
Absolutely. So Gyner, you and I catch up regularly, unrecorded,
Yeah.
truly unscripted, if you will. And we talk about one of the shared objectives we have of having more conversations about topics that are a bit more nuanced, that maybe don't see the light of day as often as others. And that is how we landed on the premise for today's podcast. So I'm really excited to get into it. For our listeners, we are going to be talking today about the untold truths of service leadership related more to the business landscape and some of the challenges that leaders face, in their roles. And then we're going to do a part two where we dig a little bit more into the personal side of that. So just to sort of set the stage for the discussion, I'm excited to get into it.
Me too. Me too.
Okay, so number one is that the reality is there are some decisions that are just truly impossible decisions for leaders.
Yeah.
So, what comes to mind when we sort of when I say that truth?
Yeah. For me, what comes to mind is as a leader, there have been times in my career that I've had to like set aside the personal side of my beliefs in order to make a business decision that may, to the receivers of the negative side of that decision, may seem a little cold and harsh, and may not only seem is cold and harsh. So I'll say it as a statement. And in like what comes to mind for me was during COVID, our business was just like decimated at one point in time, right? And we had to make some really critical decisions at the time, like are we going to risk the entirety of the stability of the business, as an example, by keeping everybody on board? I mean, we're a large organization. We couldn't take PPP money and all that other stuff, right? Or are we going to right-size the organization in order to maintain stability and a plan to recover out of COVID at some point? And
Hmm.
this is at a time where we didn't know what some point even meant.
Hmm.
It was a little bit of, is this going to be a hockey stick recovery or is it going to take years and years? And,
Yeah.
you know, economists even had different schools of thought if you were to go back and listen to some of the, interviews done at the time. And we went with like option two, super
Hmm.
hard decision, right? I had to, at that time, I was almost 17, 18 years into the business. And I had to furlough people that I had worked with since I was a very junior manager in the organization at times.
Hmm.
Like, very hard decision. And for those people, and some of them may end up listening to this, um, I know that a lot of animosity came out of that decision-making process.
Hmm.
And I recognize that. And as a human being, I would probably feel the same way.
Hmm.
In fact, I know I would.
Hmm.
But from a business leader standpoint, there was a subset of the organization that felt stable when we made those choices
Hmm.
because there was clarity in the direction of the business, right?
Hmm.
There was a business that was going to come out of this confidently and be a more successful company out of COVID, which ended up being a truth, by the way. We were saying
Hmm.
it at the time with some level of uncertainty, but we came out of it. So, I mean, those decisions are really hard ones. They're
Yeah.
really, really hard. And the undertone of that, what you're hearing from me is sometimes the person or the people that are delivering the message may come across as cold and uncaring, but trust me, they are not. Like
Mm-hmm.
they're making some of the most difficult decisions on behalf of the business, and they're having to set their emotions aside, which itself is a moral conflict for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it is, we're talking about truths, right? And truths that maybe aren't said often. And so the truth, your truth is your truth. And I think, there's potentially people, I'm just thinking about some of the people that could be listening to this
Yeah.
thinking like, whatever, I don't feel bad for them, right? And that could be their truth, and that's okay, right? But the reality is, leaders are human too, or at least most of them, or some of them, right? It's hard to not, I think in this whole conversation, it's gonna be hard to not cross over in the personal because there's so many ways that the topics intersect. But if you're a good leader that does care, right? Then you are inevitably going to be put into situations that feel impossible, that there is really no good outcome because the other side of the coin is, going to be really tough. And it probably is a reality that isn't talked about a lot. And I think, I can certainly understand some of the reasons why, but it's also there's there's leadership skills to your point, and I think it's again, this gets into some of the other topics, right? But there's skills about, the necessity of having hard conversations and being able to do that in a way that, is empathetic and respectful, but you also have to hold firm in what the decision is, and you need to, not allow some of those emotions to take over the interaction, and that's a tough balance.
Yeah, I worked with someone in the past when I was a project manager. I had to do a couple of restructuring events years ago. And I remember after doing one, which was material, I was at a Chili's in Dallas with an HR leader. And I remember her saying, "So how did it go?" And I said, that was really rough. Like I felt very emotionally drained after that day, right? And she goes, "Good. You're remembering that you're still a human being,
Hmm.
right? And all of this." And I would say to people that it's okay, like to feel that way or whatever way you're feeling. That's how I was feeling at the time, but you may feel
Hmm.
differently about it. But it's also okay as a business person to have to make those tough decisions,
Hmm.
right? So if we're talking about, we're when we go to work, part of our objective is to retain our humanity, but part of our objective is to be a business person and a leader.
Right.
And that doesn't come with being easy. And frankly, I don't know where I heard it recently. The idea of being a leader is always about solving constant hard problems,
Hmm.
right? By the way, I'm shamelessly stealing that. It's not mine, right? But that's truth. No one's walking into my office on any given day saying, "We had a great day today, and here's all
Hmm.
the positive things for you to know about." Usually it's, "Hey, we have this really difficult situation. What do we
Yeah.
do?" Right?
Yeah. I think that's a good point, balancing your humanity with what the job is, that you've been given. And, listen, I'm a big believer that and this is why I'm saying like time to time there are decisions that just truly are impossible in the sense of, I'm a big proponent about the idea that you can run a business and treat people well, and if you can do that, they will treat customers well and the bottom line will follow. But there are going to be circumstances and situations where even with that frame of mind, the it doesn't allow you to just, do things in a way that feels good for everyone, right? And that's just the 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 real deal. So the second one on our list, the second untold truth is the ambiguity around AI has the potential to become very toxic. So, what is your take on the ambiguity around AI?
No, it's the elephant in the room. Like
Hmm.
AI is going to take everyone's job.
Mm-hmm.
And like as a leader, we're just starting to have initial conversations at Fortis, nothing material, I would say, full
Mm-hmm.
disclosure. Um, but the first challenge you have as an organizational leader when you're starting to talk about AI is you have to have the open conversation about what does that mean practically for your organization? Like
Mm-hmm.
the people who hear those two letters immediately think this is all a cost saving opportunity for the business,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you're going to cut heads, you're going to get rid of people because they've heard the stories about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the stories are minority or not. I haven't done the math on that or the research, but there's truth too, right? You go online,
Mm-hmm.
you read about it, and it's true. There's plenty of examples to read about, right?
Yeah.
If as a leader, if you're not having that first conversation about the reasoning as to why you need the AI tool and what does that mean for the people in the business,
Mm-hmm.
if you don't lead with that, you're going to have cultural problems. And then the second question is, have you defined your problem statement about what AI is coming into your business for really, really well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think there's there's a couple sides to this, right? So the first is, there's ambiguity in terms of what should a company be doing with AI now, next, et cetera, right? I think leaders know that it needs to be something, but to your point, how well is that defined, right? Are we doing it just because we think or know we should be doing it, or are we doing it because we've identified where in the business it can add value, right? And so that's one source of ambiguity. The other, and I think the one that has potential to create more toxicity is the fear, right, among the workforce. And I think it's also important going back to our first truth of, sometimes there's situations with not a great outcome, right? There are situations right now where I think like a leader reassuring the workforce is full of crap, right? Because they don't actually know and they may be giving false hope. And I think that will bite you, right? Like, don't say it just to say it, right? Because that will create more problems. I had a conversation, I was in Stockholm in May for IFS Connect, and we had a little gathering for Future Field Service. And I was talking to Carolyn Hagstrom, who leads customer service at Vattenfall, and she spoke at an event that we did a couple years ago. They've won awards for like their people-centric culture. She talks a lot about being a people-centric leader and how it's not fluff and it delivers results. And, so I kind of asked her, and it wasn't in a recorded conversation, it wasn't at an event, it was just her and I, like, so how does AI like fit in with your people-centric, culture, and how are you kind of navigating that? And she said, I'm just being honest, even when that means I'm saying I don't know, right? Because she said, what I do know is if we don't go down this path, there won't be jobs to save. There won't be jobs to distribute. Like it is the future, it is here, we have to do it, right? So what exactly that looks like and where, jobs may be consumed by it versus where new jobs will be created, I don't know that yet. So I'm just very honest about what I know and what I don't know and why we're doing what we're doing and what that might mean. And I think that is really good advice, right? Like
For sure.
don't try and quell fears by just giving out platitudes or not being honest, but the awareness of how persistent that fear is in the workforce is something that I don't think people are taking as seriously as they need to.
No, I would agree. And I think you led the whole, this whole podcast is about truths, right? Honesty is also about uncertainty at times.
Hmm.
And just saying that AI is the biggest thing, as much as it drives certainty in terms of the use case you're trying to fix,
Hmm.
it drives uncertainty in a lot of other areas in your organization,
Hmm.
especially in people culture, right?
Hmm.
And you have to acknowledge the uncertainty. I think that's like great example of how to handle it well, which is like, hey, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And what I know is
Mm-hmm.
we have to do it or we're going to be outcompeted in our own space, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I know. What I don't know is, what happens to your roles in a year, 5 years, 10 years. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't know if new roles will be needed. Those are all very relevant examples, but I think it rolls up to that conversation, that truth
Mm-hmm.
has to be very like upfront
Yeah.
about what you know and don't know, and
Mm-hmm.
both have to be articulated, right?
Yeah. And then, and as your leader, here's what I can commit to.
Yes.
I can commit to sharing with you what I know when I know it. I can commit to, you know, this regular cadence of communication. I can commit to answering your questions as best I can. I can commit that we'll do everything we can to upskill and reskill people. I can, whatever the things are, right? And then keep your word, right? I mean, that's it's the simple stuff that like it just doesn't happen. And then it exacerbates this fear because it's like, well, now they're not saying anything, so everything is left to interpretation.
No, for sure. And I think it's kind of speaks to the, hard conversation. These things are all like interconnected, by the way.
Hmm.
5 points. I think the audience will pick up on it's more of a Venn diagram than it is
Hmm.
like you have to have that hard conversation again, right?
Hmm.
Your point one was hard conversation, point two is AI. Those two are interconnected because you have to have the hard conversation.
Yeah.
Like and you're doing it because you need to, right?
Hmm.
The organization deserves it. And I think the other hard truth is, quite frankly, that on AI specifically, that it's inevitable
Hmm.
for all organizations more broadly.
Hmm.
And if you're a leader right now and you're pushing it off,
Hmm.
you are fooling yourself
Oh, for sure.
because it's inevitable. And
Yeah.
take that as a truth walking away too. Like you're going to kick the can on it as far as you can, but
Hmm.
at some point you're going to pick up the can.
Yeah.
It, it is. It's a hard truth for all of us.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, fair point. Also, it's inevitable and what it ultimately looks like, none of us know, right? So like the same fear that is rampant in the frontline workforce right now, like is probably shared to some extent. I mean, there's articles all the time like, can AI replace CEOs? You know what I mean? Like it's and who knows, right? I mean, I think that's the part of it is like there are questions that no one has the answers to right now. So, I mean, if you think you do, you're fooling only yourself, really. So yeah,
Hey, you know what? I'm sure that I can be replaced by AI somewhere. But
I don't know. I mean,
hey,
listen, at the end of the day, like, on the AI conversation, I think to me, there is always going to be a need for humans, period, right? So it's less so about will it take over everything, I hope, or in my mind, but more so about, I think being curious and being open-minded and understanding that you don't know what you don't know. And to be quite honest, I think part of this, ambiguity is fueled by leaders who, due to ego, don't want to admit the answers that they don't have. Right. And that's,
do.
so
That's
it's just the reality. Like,
that is the truth, but it's the truth, right?
yeah,
Get past your ego on it. If you don't know, you don't know. If you don't
right.
know the outcomes of the AI interaction in your business, if you don't know how the AI works, if you don't just say it,
Hmm.
like, and you know, go go learn more and
Right.
educate yourself more.
Yeah. Which brings us very neatly to our third unspoken truth, which is that the value of experience has been and is continuing to be redefined. So, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think, experience in the traditional sense was, and some of it still exists today, but maybe not to a lesser degree, is my perception, right? My truth
Hmm.
of this is, experience used to be, I worked 20 years somewhere, I have all this experience in a certain functional role, so that when I get the next leadership role, that means I have, in quotes, most, if not all, of the answers required to step into that role and continue to operate some level of continuity or
Mm-hmm.
maybe an improvement, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think what leadership today is some of that, not to the degree that it was, more so leadership has evolved to the proxy of how do you solve problems and get access to the resources you need to solve those problems? And when I
Mm-hmm.
say resources, it's AI, it's people, it's, you know, external consultants, it's internal experts in your business, subject matter experts that you have all
Mm-hmm.
your businesses. Do you have the leadership competency and awareness to be able to bring the right people in the room? And by the way, room is more virtual today than it used to
Mm-hmm.
be, but that to me is where experience really matters because I will say as a CEO in private equity businesses, the expectation of independence and my ability to go have my entrepreneurial spirit behind me to go figure it out
Mm-hmm.
is as important as the experience that I brought from
Mm-hmm.
a supply chain guy, an operations leader, and everything else that I brought to the table is as important for me to be able to go figure out some of the problems where I don't have the skills or the
Mm-hmm.
that it from the past. So I think, realistically speaking, that's where it's headed. In tying back to AI point number two,
Mm-hmm.
like that's a really prime example. I think a lot of us, unless you're in technology spaces, don't understand AI particularly all that well. We think we do,
Mm-hmm.
we try to, but we don't. So
Mm-hmm.
your experience is going to be all about how do you go and find the experts, the people, the knowledge base necessary for you to be enabled as a leader to use something like AI and go do it well. But
And
that,
keep doing it, right? As the themes change, as the topics change, as the capabilities change, right? It's an ongoing process. Yeah, I had a conversation with a woman named Trina Nielsen in Copenhagen a couple years ago, and we had lunch, and she wasn't and isn't the CEO of a company. So, different level of leadership. But, I was asking her about kind of her career trajectory, and she said, leadership today is very humbling because, she said it used to be that you should be the one with the answers. You were often the, most qualified person in the room. You were maybe the highest paid person in the room. And she said, like, the landscape is completely different. Like, that's all of the things that used to make you successful. If you hold true to those, will now ruin your career, right? Because it isn't about being the smartest person. It isn't about having all the answers. It isn't about, that mentality at all. It's about, curating different skill sets and empowering people to work toward a common objective. And that's just a totally different, set of experiences than, learning a style and mastering the style and staying true to the style or what have you. And yeah, I think there's such a need with how quickly things evolve to, really be hungry for your own continual education and improvement. And, again, this bleeds over to the personal, right? But like, are you changing as a human being? Or are you, trying to be what you were 20 years ago and just ride it out until,
yeah,
I mean, that's not what is super useful in the way business is today, and so you have to, it is probably humbling for some, and you have to kind of, but I think it can also be really exciting, if you can embrace it, right? To learn different things and to, care more about other people's perspectives and experiences and, you know, um,
yeah.
yeah. It's
And
also interesting how this topic is true in, specifically for field service organizations, how the approach to talent has shifted to look less for experience, look more for, things like teachability and willingness to learn and drive. Some of those things you said, like it's more important for me to have the drive to go figure things out than it is to have some rule book that I've curated over my career.
Yeah, I would say one thing on experience for me too is like there's this fixation for leaders to be right.
Hmm.
Your experience does not validate your level of rightness.
Hmm.
So I'll just like, since this is unscripted, we'll just say that out loud.
Yeah.
Like that is not your experience shouldn't be weaponized in an organization or as for
Hmm.
you leader. That's not what it's for, right? It's for you to enable outcomes, for you to
Hmm.
enable success in your organization, success with your teams. It is not a weapon. And
Hmm.
I have seen so many people that use at all. I've seen board members, I've seen CEOs, I've seen different levels in the organization. They use experience as a weapon of rightness. Don't do
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
That is such a huge miss in an organization, and it causes so many problems that are very difficult to unwind.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think, there's just some harsh realities here for I don't think you'll take offense to this, but folks like yourself and myself too. I mean, I would love to think I'm, still young and figuring it all out, but I'm really not that young anymore. You know what I mean? I'm still figuring it
I don't
out,
take
but
offense to
you know,
that.
um, but my point is like even if you take it back to AI, right? Like if you think just because you run the company or you run a department, that there aren't people coming in out of college or out of, whatever their training has been that know far more than you do about that topic, like you're fooling yourself, So,
Agreed.
like, coming in with the, well, I've been doing this for however many years, or I have this qualification, or I had this accomplishment to combat your insecurity about the fact that you're bringing people into your organization that are smarter to you about certain things. I mean, good luck. Like, good luck with the objectives, right? Because it's like again, it goes back to Trina's point. Like it's not like a one man band. You know what I mean? Like everyone has to be working together, and that means that you're going to need skills and talent that are, specialists in certain areas that far supersede what you can know about a certain thing, and you have to respect that, right? Like,
I'd say an example I would have for myself is, I need to be the curator of the art museum. I am not the artist,
mm-hmm,
right? And your example of like bringing in the best people is like, hey, you know what? You got to find the best artists, and those artists are really good artists.
mm-hmm,
And I don't take offense to that at all. Frankly, look, if I get to a point where my skill was building great teams where, I was to some degree obsolete, I would consider that a superpower,
mm-hmm,
right? So like if that's the beauty, if that would be my objective, great.
mm-hmm.
I'd stand proudly in front of that every single day saying, yeah, I built a really great team and they didn't need me anymore.
Yeah. Like, look at all these artists that are working together to create this beautiful art. And,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, it's really interesting. Okay, so the fourth truth is we talk all the time. You read, you hear, you may even say that failure is essential to innovation, but everyone or many people are still avoiding it.
Hmm.
So this is one of those things where I think people say it because it sounds good, and they know, or they know they should, right? But then what are some of the underlying factors that kind of prevent what's being said from being practiced?
Yeah. To me, like there's like two personas in this. There's the, I'll say the employer leader persona, and then there's the employee persona. The employee persona of this one, when you say to an employee, like, go figure this out and fail or whatever, do the inspirational rah, 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 you can do this. Don't worry. If you fail, you fail. Well, but you don't give them clarity on what that means. Like,
Hmm.
what happens if I fail? how quickly should I know that I'm failing?
Hmm.
You don't define the boundaries as a leader for that employee. You may think you're empowering them to go do something cool and, do it on their own and learn. But what you're also doing in parallel, unknowingly, I'll give people the benefit of the doubt as a truth, is you're creating a lot of anxiety for that person. Like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, if I fail, what happens?
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job if I don't do this particularly well. There's all these questions
What
of
does failure
what,
even mean?
what does failure
Right?
mean?
Like in his view,
Right.
like how do I know if I've failed or if I've succeeded? Right.
Right. So give them clarity on what
Or how
fail.
do I know I've succeeded at failure? Right? Like I don't,
And everyone will be like, well, you define success outcomes, but that's not failure,
Hmm.
right? Because if I'm if I'm getting close enough but not close, am I failing? Am I not failing?
Right.
Like you should, in addition to the success outcomes for the employees, you really need to be very clear about what failure looks like too,
Hmm.
right? Just be very, very clear with them. And then, for the employer, the failure is, hey, I don't want this thing to be kind of lingering, right? Because that's typically what happens with innovative ideas. They linger because
Hmm.
they're not defined well. And what ends up happening is this thing's going for 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. And then you do a check-in and you're like, oh my gosh, we've spent $200,000 on this thing. We should stop it right away. How did this even happen? And, reverting back to point one, now you're making that person feel bad, right?
Hmm.
We didn't define it. Like the employer's truth is also true, which is
Hmm.
failures can be expensive. Failures can be painful to an organization. Failures, yes, they drive innovation and all the cool stuff you led with, right? But they're also sometimes failures can be catastrophically bad on an
Hmm.
organization, right? So I think, for me, failures, when you say things like go fail fast and figure something out, be better at damn defining it to people.
Yeah. There
Like,
has to be scope around
has
what
to
that means. Yeah.
around what that means, right? But also to the employer, don't be scared to go do things that you'll fail on because you'll have these epiphanies along the
Hmm.
line of things about your organization or maybe some new innovative ideas that you hadn't even thought of that come as an output of those failures and would
Hmm.
only show up because you did that.
Yeah.
Go fail fast with boundaries.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because it's like, this is such a said thing. Like, failure is essential to innovation. Embrace failure, learn from your failures. But it's again, the truth is that there's still a lot of avoidance of it.
Yes.
Um, because, maybe we as leaders are not defining as well as we need to. Like, why are we trying this? And, what would be the best case outcome, but what would be a good outcome as a failure, right? Like what would be
Hmm?
optional good outcomes as failure? What could we learn from this if we don't succeed, right? And then to your point, having parameters so that it isn't so wide open that someone is, anxious. Because, the other part of this that leaders need to be very aware of is that most employees have at some point worked in a culture that punished failure,
Yeah.
that it would cost them their job or, so hearing it one time from someone isn't going to change their programming to avoid it or to be fearful of it. Um, and then the other thing, that folks have shared with me that I think is a good point is as a leader, one way you can help is by sharing your own failures, So, hey, we tried this, it didn't work out. Here's what I learned, right? And then by the teams seeing you be open enough to say when you don't get it right, that's how you can start to kind of normalize, okay, if I come to Gyner and I say, "Hey, I really screwed this up," right? It's not going to be, "Well, you're done," right? It's because he's been honest about when he's fallen short and what he's taken from that. There's a piece of it there. But I absolutely think your point is a great point about if you really want to equip teams to try things, right? Because you should, to your point, it's valuable, but set the stage for them to know what the playing field looks like so that there aren't all these questions. And so everyone can kind of know, okay, you have this much room, go do it, and then let's review.
Yeah, and to be clear as a leader, um, I think about like we're talking about failures and innovation.
Hmm.
I think be very good and delineate what failure and innovative ideas is different than failure of somebody's day-to-day performance, right?
Right.
Because I think that's where like as leaders you muddy the water a lot.
Hmm.
Like don't do that. Like clearly define different type levels of outcomes and expectations for innovative failures versus
Hmm.
hey, your day-to-day job or role and what you're supposed to do there. Don't, they're not the same measuring stick.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think that's part of the problem, right? Is sometimes unknowingly as a leader, you're treating them the same and they're not the same, right?
Hmm.
One is trying to drive really different outcomes, I would call explosively positive outcomes for the organization. And the other one is about like maintenance and quorum and
Right.
running business every day.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, the one there really is more of a guidebook for, right? Like there's just more knowns and it's more formulaic and they should already have more criteria for what success is. And then it's more of a conversation of if you're not meeting that, then what's going on, right? Versus, you know, if you're thinking about incubating some sort of innovative idea, there isn't going to be as many specifics, but how do you kind of create a framework at least or some, guidelines so that it isn't so wide open that it causes confusion and anxiety and all of
Oh,
that. Yeah, really good points. Okay. Last but not least for today, the last untold truth is discrimination,
yes.
still quite rampant, and far more so, at least, than many people want to acknowledge or are willing to talk about. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on this?
Tough subject, right?
Hmm.
I'll lead with to the audience. Like, there's so many blinking headlines right now about this that you might be kind of, uh, putting a little bit of a veil in front of you because you're like, I don't even want to talk about this right now. It's really
Hmm.
hard, right? Especially with the environment. And I think for me, it's like, how are you best suiting yourself to bring in the right level of ideas into the organization that you need,
Hmm.
right? And I think what happens is like early in this conversation, we talked about experience. Experience brings bias,
Hmm.
right? And the bias is I know the right people, I know the right players, I know check, 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 check. I am the guy. Remember the danger of being right that I said
Hmm.
earlier? That comes into this one a lot,
Hmm.
right? Like, and that's where you may not even know that the discrimination is happening
Hmm.
because your rightness is getting in the way of what do you need for what you're working on?
Hmm.
And
Or,
and how do you drive in that diversity of ideas? Yeah, yes, I use the diversity word, everybody. But it's true, right? You want the diversity of ideas to come into the organization to get you the best outcome.
right.
That's the objective, get the best outcome.
So what I was going to say is not only what do you maybe not know what you need, but how much better could the outcome be if you were not so narrowed in on, the often, I mean, the good old boys club, that's what it ends up being. Like, oh, I know so and so, they worked for me at this company and they know so and so, Um, and it's interesting because I talk to a lot of, I try to talk to a lot of women in service,
Mm.
and talk to them about, their career paths and, how they've gotten to where they are. And I talk to people all the time about the fact that like, and that's just one category, right? But the idea of discrimination based on gender is still real. I mean, it happens still all the time.
Yeah, I think you said it right. I mean, like the good old boys club. I'm not going to say, here's what I'll say to folks who are listening to this. It's unknowingly happening most of the time, but it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Are people maliciously doing it? Do they have like a notepad next to them and are they writing the names of the good old boys club on it? No. But what they're doing is that bias coming through. I
Yeah.
have 5 people I know who have done this with me before, and that's my club, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to bring them all in, and we're going to solve all these problems together, right?
Yeah.
And you're missing the point of what diversity of thought is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Diversity of thought is bringing in those unique experiences, bringing in those folks that have had different ideas, having different points of view, whether that be from women or people of color, doesn't really matter. Like bring them in the room and have good conversations, fulsome ones
Mm-hmm.
about business and the outcome you're trying to drive,
Mm-hmm.
and let that drive your outcome,
Yeah.
right? Because you're going to find that there is so much value in that. And it's past all the headlines. Forget the headlines for a second,
Mm-hmm.
right? I always like to revert to, my parents were immigrants. They came to the US, right? Where you hear we're the melting pot and all the other stuff. What made America great for so long, and I also just said something unknowingly, um, promise, for so long was that diversity of thought. If you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, the whole idea that we were this melting pot of the world is got us to where we're at today,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? All the different, thought and workers and people before us that put this thing together,
Mm-hmm.
it was a whole bunch of diversity,
Yeah.
right? And they were being diverse without even knowing it, right? And what I'm saying is like, try to do that. Try to
Mm-hmm.
think about like, be diverse without knowing it.
Mm-hmm.
Just totally open the doors and say, what do I need how do I bring all those voices in the room to get the right like outcomes that I need or the best one,
Yeah.
right? So I don't
I
know.
think, when we were chatting before we started recording, I said like there is a group. I was going to say a small group. I mean, I really don't know. But there are people who are more malicious in this because it serves them well to be. That is a reality, right? I think the there's also a group of people that, you know, would love to see positive change and are very hesitant to play a role in that because they don't want to misspeak or accidentally offend someone, or they don't know how, or they don't want to speak up about an issue and be penalized for doing so, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's the current climate that is making people more fearful to talk about this topic, and that makes me nervous to see how much we could regress, right? Even from where we've gotten to. So I think, you know, it's a topic that people need to be aware of. To your point, whether you care about it personally, which I think everyone should, but that's because I do, right? Or whether you're just trying to be a smart business leader, it matters, right?
Yeah.
So even if you don't care personally, your business is better if you can bring in a wider, you know, diverse group of minds and experiences and lifestyles, and you know that is what will bring creativity and forward motion. So I think it's, in my mind, something that, I want to keep talking about, because if the conversations are going to be happening less because of everything that's going on, then we as people who do care, have a responsibility to make sure the conversations keep happening until they don't
Yeah.
need to, and we're a long, long way from that being the reality. I have
Totally.
so many personal experiences on this topic,
Mhm.
spanning from when my career started to like as recent as last year. I had a guy at a conference like kiss me on the forehead, and I'm like, would you do that to
Oh,
a man? I mean, it's just it, and I say that because I think people that want to think this is no longer a relevant topic, can claim it as so, but like the reality is there's still a lot of things that really do happen to human beings and really do prevent, businesses from being like as productive as they could be.
Yeah, it's, you have to be a little more eyes wide open about it.
Hmm.
That was like when if you really want to address it, then addressing it means, and it's not the prescriptive, numbers game or all the other stuff. I'm not talking about that. Like, I'm not going to get into politicking of that. I'm going to get into like, what is the best person for the role that you're trying
Hmm.
to fill? Or what is the best outcome that you want for the project that you're on?
Hmm.
The way you do that is you just open it up so that you have that diversity coming in.
Hmm.
And, by narrowing your focus to get to an outcome, I talk about it in business terms, right? Sometimes if you have a customer and you're doing such a good job for the customer,
Hmm.
they do a little bit of this, right? They'll say, hey, our bid timing is coming up. Write the bid for us so that you win it,
Hmm.
right? And then you write the bid for them. And of course, you're going to win it because you wrote the bid,
Hmm.
right? This is the same thing.
Hmm.
If you're just writing the bid,
Hmm.
then how are you really getting diverse? How
Right.
do you know what the landscape of other providers looks like? How do you really know what you're telling yourself is actually true? You haven't
Hmm.
tried, right? So no, I agree with you. Keep talking about it. Actually put action into your words.
Hmm. For
That
sure.
diversity too, like you can, you don't have to be a, because I look, some people are scared in the climate of today to be vocal about it. You don't have to be vocal to show action.
Right.
Just show
Yeah,
action.
to your point, I mean, the first thing you said was there's a lot that is unintentional. Get more intentional. Start really reflecting on what barriers are we creating that we aren't meaning to create. What, is going on that maybe we're not listening to or haven't done a good job of listening to. How do we address some of those things? There's a lot of ways that don't require any sort of, public stance or, platform. That's not necessary. But if you, care, there's a lot of ways that you can
Absolutely.
educate yourself and do things differently. So, okay. Very good. Well, Gyner, this has been so much fun. Thank you for being willing to talk about some of the less talked about things and share your thoughts and experiences.
Well, I'm always humbled to be here. Um, Humbled because I've gotten to know you as a person, and um, I feel very honored to be on these things because I've gotten to know you as a person. I've done other podcasts and stuff people can research, but sometimes you don't resonate with the person,
Hmm.
right? I truly appreciate you thinking of me here and, having this conversation. I really believe in action.
Hmm.
I'll close with that. Like it's nice to talk on all these things, but as if once you're done with this podcast, maybe take a little bit of action. It doesn't have to be like this big swath in your organization. It's time, it's okay. One focus on diversity or one truth of talking to an employee in a coaching session tomorrow. Like
Hmm.
all those things matter and add up, right?
Yeah.
So just, as you walk away, maybe give yourself a little into the audience, right? Give yourself a little bit of goals,
Yeah.
small
A
ones.
ripple effect.
Yes.
Yes. I love it. And look forward to part two when we get personal. So just
Not that good,
everyone
not the
hang
personal.
on. Yeah, you never know what's coming next. All right. Thank you. And we will be back with part two. So appreciate you. You can find more in the meantime by visiting the home of the Unscripted podcast at futureoffieldservice.com. The podcast is published in partnership with IFS. You can learn more at ifs.com. As always, thank you for listening.